Welcome to the December 17th, 2012 Troy City Council meeting. We're supposed to have Pastor Randy Vinson with us tonight. Is he in the audience? Well, if you'll indulge me, if you would please stand. Please stand for a moment of silence for the victims of the tragedy of the Newtown, Connecticut city where we lost our children and adults to a senseless tragedy. A moment of silence, and then please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The Troy City Council meeting is now called to order. The roll call, Ms. Bittner.
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Campbell?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Here.
Councilmember Teets?
Here. All present. Our first order of business are certificates of recognition and special presentations. If Ms. Cindy Stewart would come forward for the Troy City Casual for Cause.
Yep. As the council is aware, hello. The Troy employees, we dress casual on Fridays and sometimes some other special days, and we give all our money to charity. The employees vote on the, or they nominate, and then they vote. For September and October, we gave to Troy People Concerned. And Dick Snyder is the president of Troy People Concerned, and we generously donated $1,207 to Troy People Concerned. So I want to give you the check, and if you don't know about Troy People Concerned, which helps people in crisis situations, Dick's going to give you just a brief summary.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name again is Dick Snyder from Troy People Concerned. I'd like to just tell you a little bit about Troy People Concerned. We're a nonprofit organization that was established in Troy 38 years ago for the purpose of helping Troy families that are in a short-term crisis situation. And it may be due to medical reasons, loss of income, emergencies. And when people come to us, families come to us and ask for assistance, they're usually desperate. They usually have their backs against the wall and don't know where to turn. And frequently, these families are on the verge of a possible eviction or utility shutoffs. In some cases, we have limited resources that we can help these families with. But we are also a referral service, whereby we have contacts with other organizations that are able to provide longer-term assistance. And we sponsor many programs. I'll just name a few of them. We have the school backpack program in the fall, and we work with the teachers in Troy to help sponsor that program. We give backpacks full of school supplies to needy children. And in the Christmas season, we have the shopping spree for needy children, working with Walmart and the Troy Fire Department, whereby the children can pick out gifts for their spouses, their siblings and their parents. And then we provide a matching service for donors that want to give to Troy families that are in need. We sponsor many other events. We have a food pantry. We have a clothing assistance program. We have volunteers that offer to drive senior citizens to doctors and dentist appointments that do not have transportation, and we provide many other services. Again, I want to thank the city employees for their fine donation to Troy People Concerned, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. Our pasta dinner is April 25th. It's a little early. We're going to have to remind you again. April 25th. That's our major fundraiser at the San Marino Club. And it's very reasonable. I think it's $15 for adults. And we have the auction, and it's a good time. It's a real good time. And of course, Cindy, I didn't mention it, but she is our secretary at Troy People Concern. Well, thank you very much, Cindy, and thank you to the city employees.
Thank you. We're going to move down to the podium for our next presentation. If the Troy Garden Club and Telly's Greenhouse would join me at the podium, please.
Raise them in, Joe.
Where's George? Oh. George, I'm going to present the certificate of recognition first to Telly's Greenhouse and Garden Center, and Mr. George Papadelis is going to accept this on behalf of Telly's. In recognition for your donation of evergreens, petunias, marigolds, daffodil bulbs, purple mountain grass, and purple leaf canna to the Troy Garden Club to plant in front of the Troy Public Library, transforming the entrance into a breathtaking and delightful sight for visitors. Troy extends a sincere appreciation to George Papadelis and Telly's Greenhouse and Garden Center. You are an inspiration to the Troy community and a credit to yourself, your business, and the city of Troy. Presented this 17th day of December 2012. George, congratulations and thank you. That was nice. Now I'm honored to present the proclamation in recognition and appreciation to the Troy Garden Club. I assume all of you ladies belong to the Garden Club?
Yeah, and we're 10% of the members.
Wow. Do you have any men in the club?
Yes, we do. Would you like to
One?
Give me two. Three. We have three now. We're coming.
We have openings.
Okay. Whereas the Troy Garden Club was established in 1971 to provide an opportunity for members to learn better horticultural practices, promote civic beauty, and conserve natural resources. And whereas the Troy Garden Club was open to people interested in gardening and those wanting to share their knowledge and experience with others. And whereas since 1974, the Troy Garden Club members have given back to their community by beautifying many city facilities, including City Hall, Troy Public Library, and the Troy Historic Village. The Historic Village's first herb garden was planted in 1974 next to the Coswell House. And whereas the Troy Garden Club members have volunteered as hostesses to serve refreshments at the annual Troy Historic Village Christmas event each December since the 1980s, and have also decorated the entire village for this event since the 1990s. And whereas the Troy Garden Club members planted the ABC Garden, the Gazebo Garden, and moved the herb garden next to the log cabin at the Historic Village. In 2011, they decided to take over all the garden beds at the village and will transform it in 2013 to be one of the sites at the annual Garden Walk. And whereas they also donated funds to seed the village lawn and provided landscape plants around the Niles Barnard House and invaluable pro bono consulting services regarding historically appropriate plants for many historic village programs. And whereas this year, the Troy Garden Club members planted evergreens, petunias, marigolds, daffodil bulbs, purple mountain grass, purple leaf canna in the spring, and added a scarecrow this fall in front of the Troy Public Library, transforming the entrance into a breathtaking and delightful sight for visitors. And now, therefore, be it known that the City Council of the City of Troy takes the opportunity to express its appreciation to the Troy Garden Club for their hard work and dedication in beautifying the Troy community. And be it further known that the Troy City Council, City Management, and the citizens of the City of Troy commend the Troy Garden Club for its tradition of promoting civic beauty and extend our sincere thanks to all the members for their distinguished service. Presented this 17th day of December, and it's signed by myself and all members of the City Council. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next on the agenda, the Troy Public Library 2013 to 2015 Strategic Plan presentation will be given this evening. Do we have, okay. I was hoping we had some. All right. Good evening.
Hi. Thank you for having me here to present the Troy Public Library's 2013 to 2015 Strategic Plan. My name is Erin Gong, and I was the facilitator and consultant through the process. I'll start off by talking about the strategic planning process itself. Then we'll move into some of our key findings from the process, and then finally go through an overview of the strategic plan. And more details on everything we cover here are in the written report, which you should all have in front of you. So our planning process started in May of 2012 and ran through December. The whole process was led by Kathy Russ, and I facilitated the process and led the data gathering. And the process was carried out by our task force. I'll quickly go through the names. From the library, we had Kathy, Philip Quick, Ann Wright, Sarah Stockton, and Cassie Sue. We had from the city, Mark Miller and Cindy Stewart. From the Friends of the Troy Public Library, we had Eve Parsons. From the Chamber of Commerce, we had Michelle Hodges. And finally, from the community, we had April Church. And that was our task force. We divided the process into three main phases. We saw each phase as an iterative process of planning within the task force and then seeking feedback from the community to incorporate that into the planning. So the first phase, we determined the scope of the plan and pulled together a state of the library report to assess the current climate of the library and the community, as well as looking at some nationwide trends in libraries. The second phase, we determined some overall strategies and then followed up with a community survey to assess use and perceptions of the library. And finally, with phase three, we honed in on some specific tactics for the strategic plan and followed up on those with focus groups, and that led to our final planning session and the final strategic plan. So I'll just do a quick overview of each of our evaluation methods. So we had the State of the Library report that was informed by 10 staff interviews, usage statistics at the library, the City of Troy Master Plan, the City of Troy Community Survey that was done in 2011, as well as library trends and best practices in the field. The community survey was done in October of 2012, and like I said, that focused on how people use and perceive the library and what they know about the library. And we distributed the survey through an email to the Community Affairs distribution list, which is about 10,000 recipients, and we had 907 respondents. The final evaluation method was the focus groups, and those were held in November of 2012. We had 4 groups, 39 participants total, and those were recruited from the survey that we did in October. And those focus groups focused on library strengths and weaknesses, communication with the library, and also vision of the future of the library. So let's move from talking about the process of strategic planning and move into the key findings. So this is a very simplified graphic on this slide that talks about the major relationships involving the library and the Troy community. So you've got the Troy Public Library in the center there, community members on the left, the business community on the right, and then city leadership at the bottom. And we'll go over each of these players in turn. We'll focus the most of our time tonight on the Troy community members. But starting off first with the library, a few contextual factors. The near closing in 2011, rebuilding very quickly. You can see that in the stats up there. I know they're a little bit small, but essentially they're demonstrating that the library is rebuilding. But they're still working from a skeletal staff. They're stretched thin there. A lot of materials are circulating, programs are coming back, people are getting library cards again. At the same time, staff is still operating on 30% reduction from June 2010, with only 6 full-time staff out of the 72 that are at the library. So that's the library. Let's turn to the community. Like I said, we'll spend most of the time here. The library really sees a broad cross-section of the community. Income is surprisingly flat. You can see in this graphic the bars on the left that are grouped together there showing who's coming in 4 different income brackets, never or once or twice a year, and then it moves to once a month or every 2 to 3 weeks, and then once a week or more. And what you see is with the different income levels, it's actually pretty flat. The highest income level, the green bar, does fluctuate a little bit, so you have a few more people who are coming never or once or twice a year than the other income levels, and fewer people who are coming once a week or more. In terms of race, we know anecdotally from observing who comes to the library that the library sees a very diverse set of people. But in our survey, we also see that 60% of white, non-Hispanic residents actually come to the library at least once a month. So we're seeing a broad cross-section again of the community. Let's look at use and support. So I'll just explain this one again. It's a little bit hard to read on that screen, but 64% of survey respondents come to the library at least once a month, and 11% never come. So you can see the 64% on the right. The yellow bars are people who are coming to the library. The blue bars are people who are coming to the library website. And of those who never come, we still have 22% of those who have never been to the library who still feel the library is extremely important to the community. Okay, this slide takes a little bit of explanation. So we segmented the survey respondents into 4 different categories based on 2 dimensions. So the first dimension was how often people use the library, how often they come. The second dimension was people's support of the library, and this was based on responses to 2 questions. The first question was, how important is the library to the Troy community? And the second question was, is the millage a good use of tax dollars, an okay use, or not a good use of tax dollars? So those were our 2 dimensions, use and support. And when we looked at this resulting segmentation, we saw that 54% of our respondents fell into the group of people who use the library frequently, that's once a month or more, and believe the library is extremely important, and that the millage is a good use of tax dollars. Additionally, we had 16% who actually only use the library 2 times a year or less, or never. And they believe the library is extremely important and that the millage is a good use of tax dollars. So the bottom line here is we've got 70% of respondents who believe the library is both extremely important and the millage is a good use of tax dollars regardless of how often they come to the library. So let's move on to another finding. Staff is critical. The connections with staff really make the difference for people. This came out very clearly in our focus groups in particular when we talked to people about how easy it was to use the library and whether they were able to get a lot of benefit out of the library. And what they kept saying was, you know, as long as I'm able to make a connection with a staff member, I have a really great experience. That connection is really important to my experience at the library. They find it easier to use. They find it easier to get the things that they want. Additionally, there's a strong perception of the value of libraries in many different areas. So we asked people if a public library supports and enhances education in the community, if it's a cost-effective way to get education and entertainment materials, if it's a good open community space for people to enjoy, and also if it attracts businesses and homeowners, making Troy a more prosperous place. And you can see on this graph, you've got the yellow bars are people who strongly agree, and so we're really high up in the percentages, and if you group together the people who strongly agree and agree with those statements, it's around 95% for most of those, between 89 and 95%. Okay, I want to talk about two conversations that we really heard emerging from the community about the library through the survey and through the focus group. So the first was a conversation about how important and relevant the library is. So there's two sides to this conversation. On the one side, we have people who say the library is still very needed, that it needs to embrace 21st century technology and really still be relevant to the community. And I've got well, on the other side, then we have people who are saying it's not as important, the library is obsolete, I can get everything that I need online. And I've got the 95%, 5% roughly showing how we think people fall into that category, and that's based on our question, how important do you think that it is for Troy to have a public library? And 95% of people said it was extremely, very, or somewhat important, and 5% said it was not important. So I'll just read one or two of the quotes there underneath. The library website, under people who feel like the library still needs to be relevant, the library website should be a portal so that I can access all the resources through it from my home computer. I would like to see more ebooks to borrow online. These kind of comments where they want to see more resources coming out of the library that are really embracing 21st century technology, that are moving forward. On the other hand, we've got when I was younger, and there were not as many avenues to get the information that I felt I needed. I went to the library. Now there's not really a reason to go because my kids get everything they need through technology. So that's the first conversation. The second conversation we heard emerge was really about how the library is funded. So on one side we have people saying that the millage is a good or an okay use of tax dollars. There's 93% over there, and then 7% saying the millage is not a good use of tax dollars. So on the one hand, with the millage, there were kind of some sub-conversations here where people were saying the library should be publicly available, so it makes sense for it to be publicly funded. But some questions emerging about, should it be through the city budget, an additional millage? That was a concern for people, for some people. And then on the other side, the millage is not a good use of tax dollars. They say if I don't need it, why should I have to pay for it? Maybe we should pay per use or privatize or something like that. So those were two conversations we heard emerge. All right, I've got 3 more slides about the community, and then we'll move on to business, city leadership, and then the strategic plan itself. So we're about halfway done. We asked people what potential services they thought would improve the library, and we can see some of their reactions here. These are the percent of people who thought that the service would really or moderately improve the library. Borrowing e-readers, 49%. Using debit or credit cards to pay library fines online, 45%. Receiving books and DVDs through the mail, 45%. The interesting thing about this one is if you actually take out the people who come to the library frequently, this becomes a much more popular option. And we discussed how, does this really mean that the library should start mailing out books and DVDs? Is that really a cost-effective way of doing things? I think the greater picture here is that people really like the idea of the library coming to them. And how can we leverage technology to let the library come to people? Finally, using debit and credit cards to pay library fines at the library, 36%. Okay, last point about the community. We identified a huge gap in communication between the community and the library. People have a general sense for what the library offers, especially when you talk about traditional library offerings, but they consistently did not know about some of the more non-traditional library offerings, things like ebooks and digital music downloads, or even the idea that librarians are there to help people find answers to any questions that they have. And this wasn't just for non-users. Even those who came frequently were still not up to date on what the library offers. And in the focus groups in particular, it was clear that the library offers a wealth of online resources, like databases, consumer reports, live online tutoring, that people simply don't know anything about. And they're really relevant to the community, and they're often money savers for the community, but people just don't know that they're there. And this quote is from someone who says, "If the library really wants to attract more people, it should take a proactive position in letting people know what is going on." This is from the focus group. "I save thousands of dollars a year for using Reference USA for my business. You guys need to tell us how to use the library." Okay, that wraps up our community members. Let's talk briefly about the business and the city leadership, and then we'll move on to the plan. Troy has a strong business community. Along with that, a skilled and educated community to tap for higher level volunteer work. There's great potential here for the library to really engage with these businesses and with these people. There have been some successful partnerships already that indicate that this could be a really ripe opportunity for the library. You can see that the library raised $2,100 through a Barnes & Noble promotion back in April 2012, and that was also really great publicity for the library, not just a fundraiser, moving into different networks. And they also had 7 businesses participate in September's Library Card Month, and 5 additional businesses asked to participate next year. Okay, in terms of the city, the city's dealing with budget shortfalls from the 2008 crash. There's a really strong vision of the future of Troy, as well as priorities in lifelong learning and education. And this is really a time to rebuild trust with the community and with the library. So we had 89% of people who feel like the library is extremely or very important, but only 65% think that the library will continue and even grow in the future. So that says to me that there's a little bit of uncertainty with the community about what's going on with the library and what the future of the library is, even though they feel that the library is a really important resource. So let's go back to our stylized graph. We've got the library rebuilding after the near closing, resources are stretched, and the staff is stretched thin. We've got a community that has strong support from a broad cross-section of people. Online is a partner, not a competitor. From the business world, we have strong businesses and partnership potential, and also some recent successful partnerships. And then with the city repositioning after 2008, and there's a need to rebuild trust there. So if we look at these in terms of relationships with the community, we've got to address the communication gap. Also, staff interactions need to be a priority. Especially thinking about how that works when you've got a staff that is really so stretched thin that they have, they're sitting at their desk trying to interact with patrons, but also trying to get all of the work that they need to get done for the day during their on-desk time. And then also technology, that it's time to embrace even more the technology, which the library has actually been a real leader among libraries in embracing technology, but seeing that even more. With the business community, building bridges with partners, businesses, community organizations, also our expert volunteers that we talked about. And then finally with the city, really developing that environment of support and trust. Okay, so from here I want to go on to just overviewing some main points of the strategic plan. The vision of the library. The Troy Public Library is a place where people are partners in creating a vibrant and prosperous community. The mission of the Troy Public Library is to be the community's collection of knowledge and entertainment, a personal resource for lifelong learning, and a vibrant space for all. And then the values. These values are the commitments that the library wants to make and that really drive how the library does its work. So we commit to doing things well. We commit to being adventurous. We commit to building relationships. We commit to surpassing expectations in service. And we commit to learning through a lifetime. So based on this vision, mission, and these values, we determined 3 goals that we felt the library needed to pursue for the next 3 years to really move forward. The first is to excel at the user experience. The second is to increase awareness of the library value and its vibrancy in the community. And finally, develop a robust infrastructure for community support and partnership. So the first goal, excelling at user experience. This is really about making it easier to navigate the library, to use the library, making it easier for users to see what's new, to see what's going on at the library, teaching people how to use the library. There's a real gap between what the library offers, what people know about, and what they know how to use. Focus on promoting the collection, not just adding more materials, and also focus on staff training in areas like customer service. increasing awareness of library value and vibrancy. This is all about developing a brand and a marketing plan, promoting the library through email, through social media, and then working with target organizations for promotion like schools and senior housing. And this really works along in tandem with the third goal of building up partnerships, because partnerships are partly about funding, but they're also about awareness. So finally, our third goal. The library millage expires in 2016, and so the Troy community will need to determine the level of service that they want their library to provide, as well as an appropriate millage rate to continue the library. Form a development team to pursue funding opportunities, to strengthen business partnerships, to develop the expert volunteer program, thinking about ways that we can really creatively support the library through funding that isn't just through a millage, because there's a lot of opportunities for those kind of things. So then the last point is increasing collaboration with the Friends of the Troy Public Library, which has been a great support for the library, and also with the city departments. So thank you very much for your time and attention. It has really been a pleasure to get to know the library and your community through this process. And I'll take questions now on what's been presented.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilman Teets?
Do you have any statistics on what percentage of the users of the library are from the city of Troy?
We did not do a survey of library users coming into the library. What I can tell you is the people who responded to the community survey that we did, I believe it was, I can't remember the number, but I think it was around 89% lived in Troy. So you can extrapolate from that.
Any other questions? Come on up to the podium, please.
All right.
Kathy Russ, the director of the library.
In terms of your question about how many users of the library are Troy residents, about 4 months ago I looked at that, and 89% were Troy residents, and then when you add another 7% to that for the people who live in communities that form our library cooperative, with which we have reciprocal agreements. So there's about 5% who live, say, in Clawson, Birmingham, Bloomfield, and so forth. So very high percentage of Troy residents. And I made a point of asking Ms. Gong to not to leave out respondents to the survey who did not live in Troy.
Do you have a follow-up, Councilman
Okay,
Teets?
so these are only respondents that live in the city. Okay, got it.
Well, actually, one correction there. When we did our focus groups, it was just respondents who lived in Troy. Actually, for the survey results I presented, we do have everyone. So,
We have work in Troy.
yes, yeah, we also have people who work in Troy. So,
Thank you very much.
all right, thanks.
We did receive a booklet. I assume that will be available to the public for them to take a look. Is it going to be at the library?
We plan to, we wanted to present it to the City Council first, and then we will post it on the library's website. We'll have copies available in the library. It will also be on the city's website, and we will make it available in any other means that we can think of to address that communication gap.
Okay. Councilwoman McGinnis has a question.
I have a question. So it seems like we've narrowed down the top priorities, which is great, but I'm interested to know what the plan is going forward. Will you continue to meet as a group, or how are you going to prioritize what things you'll be working on first? Because I know resources are stretched thin in terms of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis at the library. So I'm interested to know how you're going to pick which things you'll be focusing on first, and kind of what the plan is for going forward.
That's a great question. What we did, and you'll see if you have a chance to read the whole document, Aaron and I identified what we're calling quick wins, which are things that we can work on now to make things better. For example, promote our outreach program, do some more work with the schools, take a look for the upcoming budget year at our staffing and see if there's anything that we can do about that. Those are just a few. We do plan to have the strategic planning task force meet quarterly to discuss progress of the plan and maybe tweak it as time goes on and things may change or factors may change. So we want to be very active with this plan and proactive about what we do. I think it's really important that we don't bite off more than we can chew, but I feel very good about this plan, that it is manageable and something that I think that we can achieve in 3 years.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Excellent report, and I did have an opportunity to try to read the whole thing, online through our package. So it's quite detailed, and I was impressed with it. But one thing I know you need to be putting a lot of emphasis on is this strong business model, and that was reflected in your goal number 3. And I like what you're saying within an environment of trust, okay? So you've got a millage so far, that takes you to a point, but I was interested in your timeline because I know that's got to be a high priority in building that business model. I know you've got a number of things in mind, but could you talk a little bit about the timeline for that business model for getting additional revenue outside of the millages and so forth? And I know that's a process you're going through and you're working on, but there was a little bit about the timeline and the detail we didn't cover tonight.
Sure. I think that the first thing that we really need to do is address that through staff. Part of the, I guess I'm going to call a stumbling block or a little bit of a roadblock, is that the staff that we have are working hard in the building. And to fundraise and form these partnerships, we need to go out. And I think it's really important to free up some people to do that. I think it's important to bring people in who will help us do that. I have a master's degree in library science, and I've had some success with fundraising and grant writing, but that is not part of my professional background. I don't have a development background, so I would like to see us bring someone in with that kind of background who can really help us do that in a coordinated way, so we can really see the return on our investment. So that's really something that I'll be looking at in the budget process to see how perhaps we can find some funds to hire that sort of staff person. Another staff position is a volunteer coordinator, and this would be someone who could help coordinate those expert volunteers who we could perhaps bring in to teach classes for us and do that sort of thing. So I think you'll probably be seeing some information about that in the upcoming budget process. I think once those positions are in place, or once I have some additional support, we will do everything we can to bring as much as we can into the library and really go gangbusters, because as Aaron said, it's about partnerships, but it is about relationships. And if we can build relationships with organizations, businesses, and individuals in the community, it'll make a stronger library and a stronger community.
Mr. Miller, do you want to make a comment?
Honorable Mayor and council members, Ms. Russ is being a little modest. Could you also mention the grant you just received?
Well, I'm not supposed to talk too much about it, but so you didn't hear this. The Troy Library was just awarded a $65,000 grant from the American Library Association, and we're very proud of it. It's to develop a program that will help high school students, but also their families, save for college, save for those milestones, whether it's a house, a car, a trip, a business, what have you. And we have, in the interest of that grant, and we formed these partnerships before we applied for that grant, reached out to Walsh College, Oakland University, Green Path Debt Solutions, and banks and credit unions in Troy to help us. So we have those in place. We just found out last week we got the grant, so yay. And so I think that is the type of thing that will really help us get where we need to go. That relationship with the banks, I think, is going to be huge, and it'll help us to promote the library. And again, as Aaron pointed out, the library has so many services that people aren't aware of, and this is another way of getting those services out and making them known to the community. And I'll bring back information about the grant when I'm legally allowed to tell you.
Great.
Very good.
Congratulations on that. Any other questions? Thank you very much. It was a great report. There are no carryover items, and there are no public hearings scheduled this evening, so that takes us to public comment for items on the agenda. Before I call the first speaker, I would just like to make sure that the citizens that plan to speak at either of the public comment sections this evening, please review the rules and regulations portion of the agenda, as we will strictly enforce those rules. First speaker this evening, resident Michael Ross on 07. Good evening.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'd like to preface my comments by mentioning that I've been in this community for 25 years as a resident and voter, and I love being here, and I'm very thankful to be in this wonderful, great city that we have. And so anything I say should be under that rubric. I have a profound lack of confidence in our city government, however, since the election of 2011, and that's what I wanted to speak about, since we're going to clean that up very shortly. I think we had misguided and disingenuous counsel and direction and leadership from our city attorney, and I'm hoping now with an even deeper sense of confidence that we're going to clean everything up and Troy is going to become a city on a hill, because we're an important city for Oakland County and for the state of Michigan, and I hope that we're going to take our proper position. I would like to request that we consider the resignation of the city attorney for her leadership and misdirection in this past year, and that we consider contracting for outside municipal law services from a group that could perhaps keep us from getting into this kind of trouble in the future. This will lead us back from lawlessness and capriciousness to the rule of law and to a reliable administrative process that protects the citizens here. I attended the Wednesday mandamus hearing, and the judge clearly affirmed the counsel from the Director of Elections, Christopher Thomas, that was summarized in his letter on November 16th, that we should have an election in February. But because the city wasn't responsive, and at least half of our council kind of followed our city attorney, we will not be able to have what the law calls for, an election in February. We'll have to wait until May for that. So Mayor Daniels, a year or so ago, had said that she would not pledge her confidence in the city charter because she was concerned about the capriciousness of it. She used another word, I think it was whimsical, was the word she used. And I think what we've seen in the past year is that there was a lot of whimsy directing our city, and hopefully we can get past that. That's what my appeal for is today, that we will begin the process of getting up to being a city on a hill by getting solid legal counsel to direct us in making good decisions as we go forward and have our election in May. And that's all I have to say, and I thank you all for listening.
Next speaker is resident Linda Kaima on I-01.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I just want to make a statement. You're going to be appointing a council member tonight, and I think there's a conflict of interest. Mr. Teets, with all due respect, you and Mr. Fleming campaigned on the same slate with Carmen Johnson. You also, I believe, were her financial manager for her campaign, if I'm not mistaken. So I feel this is a conflict of interest, and I don't think you should be able to vote on the candidate. Thank you.
Next speaker is resident John Koulis on I-01.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Despite common opinion, lawyers have an ethical code we are required to follow. The code defines the nature of our relationships, from our responsibilities as advocates and counselors to when we have a conflict of interest. For a lawyer, a conflict of interest can arise when our concerns become contrary to those of our client, former client, or the court. For example, an attorney owes undivided allegiance to his client and usually may not represent parties on both sides of a dispute. When a conflict arises, the attorney holds the duty to disclose the conflict. The relationship between a lawyer and a client is much like the relationship between City Council and the people of Troy. We, the people, hired 7 residents to represent us and our interests. Recently, we fired one of our representatives for poor job performance. Now, we are depending on the rest of you to choose a suitable replacement. And it is the duty of each of you to demonstrate your undivided allegiance to Troy through this process. Therefore, for the purpose of transparency and avoiding the appearance of impropriety, we expect all of you to disclose any relationships you have with people seeking the 7th chair. With this expectation, I must ask Councilman Teets, do you believe it is important to disclose your relationship with Carmen Johnson? When you ran for council in 2011, you formed a political action committee named Friends of Doug Teets. The treasurer of your committee was Mrs. Johnson, one of the candidates now vying for the 7th seat on council. Mr. Teets, can you not see that your nomination of Mrs. Johnson has the appearance of impropriety? Do you understand that you are rewarding a person who helped you get elected with a seat owned by your client, the people of Troy? Honestly, Mr. Teets, with this nomination, I'm having a difficult time determining where your allegiance lies, with your friends or with Troy. So if there was ever an opportunity to prove that you seek the best for Troy and are committed to repairing this fractured community, now is the time. Mr. Teets, act in the best interests of Troy. Fully explain your relationship with Mrs. Johnson and recuse yourself from voting in support of her. Otherwise, you run the danger of proving that lawyers are more ethical than you are. Thank you.
Next resident to speak is Gordon Shepke on 07.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. First thing, I want to come up here and wish you all a Merry Christmas. I think that we've been through Mayor Slater, I want to thank you for the moment of silence for those parents and survivors of that unspeakable incident on the East Coast. Especially what they have to overcome during this Christmas season is going to be really difficult for them to come through. Anyway. I'd like to also speak on, last time I got up at council, I talked about reasons I had no confidence in our city attorney and the staff, and I don't know if it's the staff, if it's our city attorney or what, because lack of due diligence is going to cost us a special election. I'd like to know how much money this special election is going to cost. I'd like to know how much there is in fines, penalties, and court costs involved in this, and I'd like to get some figures on this. And this kind of stuff has been repeated too many times. So we have to have due diligence provided to the taxpayers at Troy before things go forth. As far as the recall, there was some bad advice given there on how the replacement would be made that I think could have had a major effect on the recall. The person before me talked about firing. There was a lot of misinformation and bad legal advice that could be attributed to that. So anyway, I hope in this new year we can work together, that the fractioning that's been experienced in this city that I haven't seen for many years. I've been here 45 years, and I'm grateful also to live in Troy. We have to work together. Troy deserves better. Thank you for your time, and please try to find out what the costs are from this debacle we're going through. Thank you.
That concludes the list that signed up to speak. Public comment. Now is the time for City Council, City Administration response. Is there anyone at the table that wishes to speak in response? Councilman Teets.
Sure. First, give the opportunity to the city attorney to give some general response to the questions about lawsuit and so forth.
City Attorney Bloom, it's your choice whether you want to respond to that or not.
Yeah, actually, thank you, Councilman Teets. I do want to just clarify that the special election, it is estimated to cost $50,000, but that's not something that we were looking to do. Actually, we were trying to avoid having a special election. So that, I think, is a response to Mr. Shepke's question. And I can go into some of the other information as far as how we arrived at that if council wishes to do that, or we can do it at a later time. I would leave it to your discretion.
I would like to give you an opportunity to respond at a later time rather than this evening, where you could collect your thoughts. If you want to put it in writing and respond that way, that would be fine. But I'll give you an opportunity to respond later if you want to. At your discretion how you would want to do it, unless there's an objection. You don't even have to.
I'm just not sure which comments you want me to respond to. I mean, I think it's pretty clear what our position was, and that we were fighting to uphold the charter provisions, which, again, there was a conflict in state law. We have a decision from an independent person, which is the judge, and I think we're planning to move forward with that.
Councilman Teets?
You bet. Just a couple minutes ago, someone said my ethics were comparable to an attorney and a lawyer, in fact. And there's a lawyer that said as much, and so that's always difficult to hear. A couple quick things. Number one, I don't want to go too far into this right now to taint the interview process, which we'll be doing in just a couple minutes. However, in 2009, I did in fact run with Carmen Johnson. She was a supporter, helper, and so forth. In 2011 as much as well. And I don't think I've hid that fact, and if anybody cares to know, it's certainly very easy to find, and I appreciate two people bringing that up tonight. In the same way, I want to congratulate everyone that's applied, and I know that I have but one vote among 6, and I'll be voting for the people that interview the best tonight and do the best job. And I think I think that is a pretty clear way of making decisions. In the same way, the application process was open to all citizens of Troy. All citizens of Troy. Some people that attend a lot of meetings didn't apply, and that's their decision. They can decide whether they want to apply or not, or just attend the meetings. But I want to congratulate all those people that did apply and have the courage to fill in the seat. And we look forward to doing the interview process to hear from them, and look forward to hearing their responses to some interesting questions. So,
thank you. Any other questions, responses? Just a quick response to Mr. Ross. I appreciate your comments regarding moving forward. I concur that it's time. The decision's been made. I've indicated all along my faith in the city attorney and her direction that she gave to council. That hasn't changed for me. I put my faith in that decision, and I want to move forward. We are going to have an election in May. We will have a new mayor in May. We're going to make another selection this evening to fill my vacancy, and I feel good about the process, and it's time to move forward. So thank you to the city attorney and everyone else that worked hard on this situation. So that concludes public comment, and we have no postponed items. So we will move to regular business. And I'm not going to take any action on the DDA authority this evening because I am going to take action on I-2A this evening. And once I do that, then that will attach it to the next city council meeting where we can take care of the DDA and the Planning Commission. So tonight, I am going to move forward the following nominated persons to serve on the boards and committees as indicated to the next regular city council meeting for action. Planning Commission, I'm going to appoint the 3 individuals that have asked for reappointment. Michael Hudson, whose term expires 12/31/2015. Philip Sanzica, whose term will expire 12/31/2015. And John Tagle, whose term will expire 12/31/2015.
Support.
Moved by the chair and supported by Mayor Pro Tem Fleming. Discussion? The vote, Ms. Bittner?
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Yes.
Councilmember Teets?
Yes.
Motion passes. Mayor Pro Tem Fleming, were you prepared to act on B portion this evening, or did you want to take no action on that?
Yes, on the B portion of that nomination, which is you're talking about the Employee Retirement System Board of Trustees and Retiree Health Care Benefits Plan and Trust.
Yes.
Yes, there's one opening there, and that person requests reappointment, so I would nominate Mark Solis to that position as a reappointment.
Support. Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Fleming and supported by Councilman Henderson to appoint Mark Callis to that position. Discussion? The vote, Ms. Bittner?
Councilmember Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Yes.
Councilmember Teets?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes. Motion passes. We have a change. There is a request for a closed session this evening. Is there a council member that would like to move that resolution? Councilwoman McGinnis? Welch.
Be it resolved that the Troy City Council shall meet in a closed session as permitted by MCL 15.268, Parent E, Secretary of State Ruth Johnson versus Aileen Bittner et al.
Moved by Councilmember McGinnis and supported by Councilmember Campbell that we meet in closed session this evening. Discussion? The vote, Ms. Bittner?
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Yes.
Councilmember Teets?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Campbell?
Yes.
Motion passes. We will do that after we take a recess after the meeting this evening. Okay, that brings us to the item that everybody's waited for this evening, I hope, the appointment of City Council member. We have 6 candidates that are going to interview this evening, and I would like to go over a little bit of the process before we call our first candidate. And if I have consensus from the table that I will ask them to introduce themselves and just speak briefly about themselves, if that would be okay. Then we will start the questioning in order as they are written on the documents that were provided to us tonight. Is there consensus for that? Okay. I would like to turn the microphone over to City Manager Kishnick, who will explain the process that we will be using to select the candidate after we hear the interviews. So, Mr. Kishnick, if you could.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, thank you. Just a point of clarification, we did receive a phone call today from Dan Fair that he was not able to make it tonight, and it is my understanding that he's not here as we speak. So there may be only 5 candidates for the interview process. But my recommendation would be to continue to and follow the path that you have followed and we have employed already in the narrowing down process. And when we're done, we could call for a show of hands on each name, and each council member and mayor being able to vote for 2, and requiring you to vote for two different names, not the same name twice, so two different names, and then at that point, after the tally is made, determine if a clear winner emerges, or if there's two that we would need to repeat the process and maybe have more discussion on.
Councilmember Teets.
Yeah. Did Mr. Fair indicate that he wasn't interested or that he was ill?
I wish I could answer that question. It was just that he could not make it tonight, right, Lori? Makes it difficult, I know.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll proceed with the information we have, and that is that he didn't ask for a different meeting or to have another opportunity. So if in fact he is not here, we will then proceed with 5, if that's the consensus.
My final recommendation would be to stay here until you do have a clear winner, and not go home until a council member has received at least 4 votes.
We will do that. Councilwoman McGinnis.
I have a question. I probably should have asked this earlier. I noticed that we don't have it, that we'll be swearing in a new person today. Then would we expect that that's going to happen at our next regular scheduled meeting, and will that allow us to continue to comply with the requirements that we've talked about?
City Attorney Bloom.
Yes, we didn't feel like it was fair to put a person in a council meeting without giving him an opportunity to really prepare for the meeting. So yes, the appointment is made, and then that vacancy would be filled. Certainly, the person can be sworn in as soon as possible by the city clerk, and then you can have a ceremonial swear-in at your next meeting as well, and that should satisfy all of the requirements.
Thank you.
Unless there's an objection from the table, I would like to see that person get sworn in almost immediately in case something comes up between now and the next meeting, a special meeting is called or something is called. So is that okay?
Yeah.
So if we could arrange that for tomorrow, or thank you. I did want to indicate that we are going to take the candidates in alphabetical order. We decided to do that in fairness, and we are going to ask the same question from each council member to each candidate, and we will go in order as they were given to us. That will be, I will ask the first question, Mayor Pro Tem Fleming will ask the next second question, Councilmember Campbell will ask the third question, Councilmember Henderson will follow, Councilmember McGinnis, and Councilmember Teets will conclude the questioning. And Community Affairs Director Cindy Stewart will escort the candidates into the council chambers where they are hidden in seclusion, and after they've gone through the interview, is it okay for them to remain here, or would you prefer them to go back?
It was our recommendation that they continue back into the room, and then when all the interviews were done, they could certainly come out here and listen to the discussion and the voting, but just as a matter of respect to the other applicants, to go back to the other room.
Sounds good. Any other questions? Councilman Teets?
Last question. Are you looking for 2-minute responses to these questions? I just wanted to have that discussion before we do the first interview. What are your inclinations? The council's
2 minutes?
2 minutes per question.
2 minutes
That's
per
fine
question.
with me.
Can we do that?
Would you like the timer set with the beeping?
Yeah, we'll let them know that when they...
Within reason.
Well,
at some point you have to have a stop,
I understand.
stop clock to these things.
Good point. If we could do 2 minutes, that would be great. We will take a recess after the candidates are finished with their interviews. And then we will come back and make a decision. Okay? Any other questions? Stuart, would you bring in the first candidate, Mr. Richard Bobian?
Rich.
Good evening.
Well, thanks for inviting me to the party.
You're welcome.
Well, you're very welcome. If I could just do some house cleaning to begin with. I'm going to ask you to just tell us about yourself, introduce yourself, and if you would take about 1 minute to do that, and then each council member is going to ask you an independent question with a limit of 2 minutes for each question. If you, and there is a clock right here, up here, and
The blank clock.
we're not going to take you down if you go over 2 minutes, but we would appreciate it if you would try to stay within 2 minutes of the questions. And they're not that difficult, I don't think. So if you would please start by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Dick Bobian. I've lived in Troy for 39 years. And I've lived in the Somerset Apartments, in the Mount Vernon sub across from Athens High School, and now in the Troy Estates sub near Bowlin School. I've been in the engineering business for 25 years. My employment experience also includes some time in local government. So I bring to you some experience in both business and government, which may be helpful. I have some degrees from the University of Michigan that have been helpful along the way. I guess the other thing to mention, there are some questions about experience in the community, and maybe we'll get to that later. A couple of things I didn't mention there are first that I serve on the SEMCOG Transportation Advisory Committee, so it's another volunteer adventure for me. And I chair a regional transportation operations coordinating committee, which sounds kind of strange. What is that anyway? Well, that's about, among other things, traffic incident management in Metro Detroit. So the idea is to get people who don't normally talk to each other to talk to each other. For example, it'd be good if the policemen and the firemen were on the same page, were on the scene of the crash, and so they know who's in charge and who's in charge of what.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you the first question. So references are important to the interview process, especially when there isn't time for a thorough interview. Please tell us who you chose as your references for your questionnaire and why you selected them and what they would say about you.
Well, I chose Mike Culpepper, who you have some recent experience with here as interim city manager. I chose him because I worked with him at the City of Troy and since then on other projects, so he knows my work and knows what kind of person I am. I chose John Papa George because I thought that would be someone else that you know. He's a member of the Troy Kiwanis Club, and I've been in that club for about 25 years.
and worked with John on many projects, and so he knows that I've done some work for Kiwanis. And I chose Dennis Drury, another member of the Troy Kiwanis Club. Again, I've known him for actually more than 25 years because way back when I was going to summer camp at Camp Hayawenta in northern Michigan, he was a camp counselor a couple years ahead of me, and he taught sailing. So I learned sailing from Dennis Drury, and his father was the head of that camp, Cap Drury, kind of a legend in YMCA circles. So I've known John and Dennis all those guys a long time, and said they can attest that I'm a character.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Fleming.
Yes, thank you, Dick. If appointed, what is the primary thing you would like to see accomplished by this council in the next year, and how would you contribute?
Thing I think is this needed most right now is healing, and I think I can contribute to that by my experience in working with groups who have diverse interests and getting them to work toward a common goal. So I think it'd be good to get the council on the same page more than they have been recently, as much as possible. Look for areas of agreement and see if I can facilitate those areas of agreement.
Thank you. Councilmember Campbell.
Mr. Bobian, as I'm sure you know, the Troy City Charter states that the City Council is to be a nonpartisan body, supposedly.
Yes.
Based on that goal, I want to ask you this. Are you now or have you ever been a member or supporter, financial or otherwise, to groups as Troy Citizens United, TCU, Concerned Citizen, Troy Citizens, or Trust? And if you're given this position, can you affirm that you have the ability to make decisions that are in the well-being of Troy citizens on a nonpartisan basis?
I did make some contributions to Trust, and I thought it was a good thing to have a library in the city of Troy, and so that's my extent of contributions at the local level, and I think I can be independent of them.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Henderson.
In light of our current taxable value situation, revenues in Troy are forecast to decline for the next couple years. What do you view as the best possible course of action or actions for this council?
To address declining revenues? Well, obviously you have to have your expenses match the revenues because you have that balanced budget. I know some cuts have been made in salaries and staffing. I guess I can't tell you how to make the budget balanced until I see some more details about that. I expect that property values are going to be increasing. You look longer term, over maybe a 3 to 5 year time, but you know, as things stand, you have to make the revenues and expenses match so that the budget is balanced.
Thank you. Councilmember McGinnis.
Can you please talk to us a little bit about what types of leadership roles that you've held, and what important leadership characteristics have you learned from some of these roles, and how you'll use them for the benefit of the city, everyone who lives, works, or visits here?
Wow.
I know. And that was condensed. That was actually condensed.
That was condensed.
They had to rein me in a little bit. So.
Leadership roles. I've been active in professional societies, so that includes American Society of Civil Engineers, where I was the state president. But I guess the most significant one was being the international president of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So I actually had to run for an election to do that, kind of a election, a worldwide election, if you will. Most of the members are in North America, so I was campaigning in places including Canada and all over the United States. So, let's see. I'm chairman of the Triangle Building Loan Fund. That's a fraternity of engineers, architects, and scientists. I'm past national president of that group, and the Building Loan Fund provides loans to either build or refinance or reconstruct fraternity houses. What have I learned from all this? Delegation is a good thing. There's a lot of work to do, and you need to get people to figure out what to do. I'm just about out of time. The important thing here is to get people to recognize what the virtues of your individual staff people are, the people you're working with, and get them to work on things that they love to do. So I guess that's my leadership tip for you today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Teets.
Fairly simple question, but why do you want to serve on the Troy City Council?
I thought I perceived a need for healing in the city of Troy, and I thought I could help with that. And I think that my experience in business and in government will help get you through some of that stuff. So it was just seeing the need to get some healing done and thinking that maybe I could help. And if you decide that I can help, I'll be glad to do that. And if you decide someone else is better with that, I'm fine with that too.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Best of luck.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening.
If I could just discuss a few housekeeping items for you. I'm going to give you an opportunity for about a minute to introduce yourself and tell us who you are, and then each council member is going to ask you one independent question. And if you could keep your remarks to 2 minutes for each question, sure, that would be greatly appreciated. And there's a clock right here on the edge of here that's got 2 minutes, and it's supposed to count down for you.
Sounds good.
So if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll ask you some questions.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for having me today. My name is Bert Koppel. I'm a general manager for Home Instead Senior Care in Birmingham, Michigan. My wife, Stephanie, and I, we live in Troy, and we own a business called Zippy Bounce, and we got into that business because we have two little boys, a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and we found that they enjoyed physical activity immensely, and after renting them for a while, we decided to start our own business, and we found that Troy has been a fantastic city to start a business in. Absolutely love Troy. That's why I'm here today. My wife and I have decided to make this our home. We've decided that we want to be here, that we want to make this and continue to make this a great city where our kids can grow, where they'll have an opportunity to learn, and hopefully one day have a chance to have a family here and be employed here as well. Thank you.
Great. I will ask the first question. So references are important to the interview process, especially when there isn't time for a thorough interview. Mm-hmm. So please tell us who you chose as your references for your questionnaire, why you selected them, and what they would say about you.
Sure. Claudia Mills is one of the references that I chose. I came to know Claudia when I was working as an ambassador for the Troy Chamber of Commerce, and was amazed at her abilities to connect people. And I think I've learned quite a bit from her, so much to the point where she now works for the same company where I work at. I was very impressed by her. And I think Claudia would tell you that I'm trustworthy. Integrity is number one for me. And also I'm a good boss, which is important. I also picked Danielle Workman. She works for the Birmingham Chamber of Commerce. Again, very similar situation, being able to network and connect with others. I think Danielle would also speak again to the ability for me to connect with those in the community. We're very active in the chambers, and so that's important for us to make sure we can that we can connect with people and make sure businesses are able to really understand what Home Instead does and how we can benefit their business and their employees as well. Also selected Nan Wilberding. Nan is she's a mother of quite a few children. I've had the chance to know her over the past 6 years, and we both share a similar passion for raising children, doing things the right way. I think Nan would also tell you that my abilities to communicate and the abilities to market within the community are important. And forgive me, the fourth person is totally escaping my mind right now. I'm very sorry.
No problem.
That's pretty good, remembering 3 anyways. Mayor Pro Tem Fleming will ask the next question.
Mr. Koppel, if appointed, what is the primary thing you would like to see accomplished by this council in the next year, and how would you contribute?
I think for any city council, the primary objective is to make sure that the climate for the city is one where it allows the community to thrive, where it allows businesses to grow and to flourish and to encourage entrepreneurship. And the city should be working with the city manager to make sure that that is what is being accomplished, what is happening. So in other words, making sure that the avenues are opened up with as little red tape as possible, so to speak, to be sure that businesses have the chance to grow, that they can connect, that they can tap into future resources that are going to be important for the city. One perfect example, 12% of the city's population right now is over the age of 65. And over the next 12 to 15 years, 41% of the city's population will be over the age of 65. I think one thing that council should do is be proactive and not reactive to situations. We have a unique opportunity as a city to be looking a decade down the road, to look specifically at how this can be a livable community when more than 45% of our population at one point will be seniors. And what exactly are we doing today to make sure that that is being looked at in the future as well? Not saying that would be a top priority, Mr. Fleming, but that's definitely one thing I would consider to look at to be sure those decisions are being made with that in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Campbell.
Mr. Koppel, Troy City Charter states that the City Council is to be a nonpartisan body. So based on that, I ask you the following. Are you now or have you ever been a member or supporter, financial or otherwise, of Troy Citizens United, TCU, Concerned Troy Citizens, or Trust? And can you affirm, if you're given the seat, that you have the ability to make decisions based on the well-being of the Troy citizens in a nonpartisan manner?
I have not been a supporting member of any of those groups. To add to that, I think partisan politics does not belong in city government. It's too small. You have to get along. There has to be compromise. You have to be willing to work together towards a common good of what's going to be best for the people, the citizenry, and also the business environment of the community. And anyone who brings that type of personal agenda to a city council, I think, is really kind of cutting the rest of the council members short. You have to be able to work together, especially at this level. We're not talking about big decisions on a federal level or even on a state level. We're talking about our neighbors and our friends, and that's what the primary focus needs to be for a city council.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson.
In light of our current taxable value situation, revenues in Troy are forecast to decline for the next couple years. What do you view as the best possible course of action or actions for the City Council?
I'm not a believer in big taxes. And what I mean by that is I don't think it's necessary to continue to generate revenue and keep revenue when there's not a need to spend it. And I think that's a responsibility that we should take actively for the people who live here. Property taxes should be at a place that allows us to sustain those services that we need to be the best, which Troy is in many of those areas, to possibly have a slush fund or a surplus fund. But at that point, there needs to be a point where you say, you know what, we're bringing in more money than we need. Let's lower that tax burden for some of the people in the city. That would be my recommendation.
Councilmember McGinnis.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am wondering if you could highlight some of the leadership roles that you've held and what important leadership characteristics have you learned from these roles. Let us know how you'll use them for the benefit of this city and everyone who lives, works, and visits here.
Sure. I served in the United States Army from 2002 until 2006 with a combat tour in Iraq. And the Army values that are instilled into a person, which are loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage, are all incredibly important, not just for the battlefield, not just for when you're in garrison, but also in everyday life. For me to say if there's one that would be more beneficial, I think it's really a combination of them all. Personal integrity is incredibly important. Loyalty is important. Duty, doing those things you're supposed to do, that you're called to do, that you're mandated to do. Respect for one another.